After my last video and talking with some of the community, I had the idea of breaking down how much of the mechanics of the Isle work, or at least my interpretations, and how to duplicate those mechanics, as well as how I might suggest some changes or ideas. Now, this video series isn't meant to garner the attention of the Isle devs, but rather to specifically focus on the mechanics and technical elements of the game. Some things are a bit more complex than others, but I'm hoping to just have it all make sense to the average person who may be interested in this. Maybe the most simple element and the easiest to go over is a smooth growth cycle. In particular, we're going to look at the easiest way to implement the scaling of a creature from baby to adult, and talk a bit about how certain variables, like growth rate for example, can be easily customized for different kinds of creatures, and possibly address some alternative ways we might change how the cycle operates. So let's get to it. In UE5, playable characters usually inherit from the base character class, which is just built into the engine itself. This comes with a few defaults like basic movement controls, collision, and an attached camera component, but I'm not going to get super technical here, or this video would take all day. But we'll go to the basics. So I've made this little guy as a playable character type. I can't really remember where the model came from initially, but it was used in an older project I worked on, and since it's sitting around with nothing to do, we're gonna use him. I've also created a simple little animation system for him so that he animates accordingly when he walks around, idles, or jumps. It's nothing fancy. We'll get to refining that in another video, but it'll do. So let's go ahead and open him up. So this is what's called a blueprint. All of this stuff that you see here, this is just default nodes and functionality essentially that comes with a base character class in Unreal Engine. Jump, movement, all of these things, camera input, input mapping that's a whole other thing, but it's basically just which keys do what things. If I press W, it goes forward and so forth. And then over here, this is kind of what really matters right now. This is called a timer, and as you can probably guess, it works as a timer. Every however long that I set, it will execute a function. That function is named here. And I have it set to loop so that it executes it more than once. So it doesn't just fire and then just never fire again. We want it to keep going because we want to keep growing. So when the game starts and this character comes into play, it will turn this timer on and it will say every 0.05 seconds run the function called grow. Pretty basic, right? So here's that function. And a function is just a chunk of code that just kind of self-executes. It gets called on either in that character's code somewhere else like you saw earlier with a timer, or it will be executed maybe somewhere else within just the overarching game code. But it's basically just a kind of little standalone chunk of an action. So in this case, the action, the function, is just grow. And if you look at it, it's actually pretty simple. The capsule component, that's this thing right here. This is kind of the base thing that kind of holds our character. It's their parent component. It's the very kind of top part of it, and then everything is attached onto that. So our mesh, our camera, all of these things are attached onto that central capsule component. And all characters have this capsule component. So when we grow, we're going to scale a little bit, and we don't want to just scale the mesh because we need the camera to move up when we grow. We need to make sure our collision adapts as we grow. We need to make sure all of these things work along with it. So we're going to take the whole thing from the capsule component and scale it up. And to do this, we're just going to take that scale. We're gonna, it's a vector here, so we just need part of it to really get one of the numbers out of there. Because these are all going to be the same. So if the scale is 2, all of these are just going to be a 2. So don't worry about that. But we're going to see if he's reached his max size. So our max size is kept in this variable. And this is just, a variable is just a blip of data that just stores a little bit of information that you might want to access or even change later on. And you can use that to kind of update various parts of your code or what have you, or just store a little bit of information. In this case, our max size is 2. So we want to reach a scale of 2, and then once we reach that scale, we're done. We don't need to grow anymore. Right now, our character, when he's a baby, he starts out at a scale of 0.5. And we're going to scale him up every 0.05 seconds until he finally reaches that scale of 2. Our growth rate over here is how much we want to grow every time that this function fires. So we're going to grow at about 0.001. That does not look like much, but there's a reason for that. It's because when we scale it up and we grow, we want it to look really seamless. We don't want it to kind of look chunky, like he's just, exploding in growth a little bit every half a second or whatever. So we really want to make sure that it's very seamless. So we want it to happen often, but we want it to happen at a very slow rate. We can increase this a bit, and that will basically determine how fast he does grow, which gives you a lot of versatility so that you can make this a kind of base class that you can build other creatures off of, and then all you need to do is change things like the max size or his growth rate. Once we've determined what his growth rate is, that he's whatever scale he's at, we're going to take his scale, we're going to add that teeny tiny bit of growth rate to his scale, which is just increasing his size, and then we're going to set it here. So we're taking that capsule, that whole thing, the whole character, we're increasing it by 0.001, and we're setting it. And that is all we need to increase our growth. So let's go ahead and have a look at how that looks really quick. We're just going to kind of see how it looks just running this basic code here. So this is our baby. You can already see he's kind of growing. You notice that text on the top left there? You're not going to see that change just yet, and I'll show you why. But this is our little baby. As you can see, he's getting bigger, he's getting bigger. And we'll set him next to this tree right here. You can watch him growing and growing and growing. And once he gets to about a scale of 2, where he's kind of maxed out and he's an adult size and all that, he'll stop growing. So just wait it out. Usually you would, of course, want this to take less time. But since we don't want to be here all day, we're just showing a quick example. I have it sped up quite a bit. Normally you would obviously not want it to grow quite so fast. Okay, he's almost there, I think. He'll grow a little bit more, but as you can see, he's getting big. He's not that little baby anymore. He's pretty lumbering now. I've had this model for quite a while now. I can't remember where I got it, but it was probably, honestly, somewhere on the Unreal Marketplace a while back. I think I actually talked to a guy who was making models, and he kind of came up with a design that I really liked, and I just had to get it. Alright, so it looks like we are full grown. We have stopped growing, but it still says that we're a baby over in that top corner, and that is definitely not true. So let's talk about stages of growth, right? So when you hit a certain point, you want to switch from baby to juvenile, and then you hit another point, you want to go from juvenile to subadult, and eventually we're going to hit adulthood. So to do that, we're going to add a little bit to this code here, and I already have that over here in this corner. Kind of looks funny, but that's Well, that's blueprint code for you. It's a little bit noodly. Alright, so we're just going to plug in this sequence, and this sequence, all this does is basically say, as you can see, first do this, then do this, then do this, and then do this. It just runs through each one. So after we scale up our character, the next thing we want to do is check what their current scale is. So we check it, and if we're saying, you know, it might be 0.75, and these are just arbitrary numbers I've thrown in. It could be whatever you want, and I would actually save these as variables. So let's promote that to a variable. We'll say this is stage 2, and then that's going to store that variable of 0.75. And then later, again, I can use this for other creatures, and all I need to do is update this, and that'll automatically change at what stage they become a juvenile. It makes it so easy once you have just the basics here. And as you can see, this isn't really a lot of code. So we're going to check stage 2. If we are stage 2, we're going to update that text one time. We're not going to do it more than once because that's just wasting processing power. There's no reason to run this code over and over. So we're just going to do it once, and then we're going to leave it. Then once we hit 1.25 for our scale, we're going to become a subadult. And then finally at 1.8, which is just before that max of 2, we're going to reach adulthood. So we get a little bit more growing after that, kind of like how the Isle works. So it's going to do each of these checks. It's going to update that text. And the thing here is, right now we're just updating text, but later on, we can really do a lot more by checking these stages. We could just have it say, okay, our stage is this now, and when it checks something, say like if I want to use a certain ability that I can only use at a certain stage, all I need to do is say, what stage am I at now? If I'm at this stage, I can use it. If I'm at that stage, I can't use it. Really easy. All you need to do is just throw it on the end of these. So let's try this and see how this runs. Alright, so we're a baby again. We're just kind of walking around for a minute. We'll just see what happens. Let's just hang out here in the middle. And there he goes. He's grown and grown and grown and getting bigger. And let's just watch that text over there. Now you see it says juvenile, so he's hit juvenile stage. And it's going to keep going up. He's going to hit subadult in a moment here. Alright. I mean, I could have probably sped this up a little bit more, but I didn't want it to go too crazy, and I kind of wanted to at least give a good feel of how it might really be in a game. But he's got to hit subadult now, so then the next stage is just adulthood. And you can see how it works. It's very seamless, it's very smooth. You can see the camera kind of shifts and moves with it as he gets bigger and it goes up. He gets a little bit fatter, you can see. And yeah, he's growing. He is a man grown. And he's a bit clunky, and now he's ready to go beat up whatever unfortunate creature is in his way. So we're an adult, we're done growing. We are big and plump, and we are glorious. So there you go. It's a very basic growth cycle. There's a lot more that we could probably do with it. But right now, we're kind of just trying to keep it to the basics. I also don't want to bore you guys to death with, you know, all of this coding stuff. So, yeah, it's not bad at all. But it's a nice little rundown on how a smooth growth cycle works. And we can see, you can really throw a lot in from here to kind of refine it. So if you have any ideas or suggestions you'd like to see, leave them in the comments. And let's kind of build this together. Let's make our own, we'll call it the crater. How's that sound? It'll be a whole thing. It's a bunch of creatures living in a crater, duking it out, hiding, sniffing each other, eating each other, and all that good weird stuff that comes with being an animal in a video game.